We'll start with GeoTV Pakistan.
Khalid Hamid Farooqi from Geo Television, Pakistan. Secretary General, in 28 months, NATO force is going to depart from Afghanistan. US already banned Haqqani network. There is no negotiation with Taliban. So it means that you have given up completely on that very big group of Afghanistan, which should be part of any future settlement. So after your departure, these group will be continuing their fight against the Karzai administration. Is mean Afghanistan conflict will continue in this particular scenario. Thank you.
We will not depart from Afghanistan. We will continue a training mission. But much more importantly, when we complete the current ISAF mission and establish the new training mission, very strong Afghan security forces will take over. By the end of 2014, the Afghan security forces will take full responsibility for the security all over Afghanistan. So the enemies of Afghanistan will be faced with a very strong and very capable Afghan security force. The strength will be around 350,000 Afghan security forces. And they will be well-trained, well-educated, well-equipped to take on the enemies of Afghanistan. And that makes a clear difference. It gives the defense of Afghanistan a very visible and clear Afghan face. So the Haqqani network, the Taliban, other enemies of Afghanistan will be faced with a formidable force that will do everything it takes to protect the Afghan population against attacks from the enemies of Afghanistan.
National Public Radio.
Hello, Mr. Secretary General. Terry Schultz with National Public Radio and CBS News. There was a new report from the Special Inspector General in Kabul that is very concerned about NATO's budget, about what it calls lax oversight of NATO's budget on fuel, the $1.1 billion. And it recommends holding up some of the funding for this until there is more oversight. Is this something that's been brought to your attention yet? And are you concerned about it? And secondly, what do you make of the Taliban's threat to do everything possible to kill Prince Harry? Thanks.
On the first part of your question, it's not being brought to my attention. I don't know anything about it, so I don't have any comments on it. And the latter part?
The Taliban has threatened to do everything possible to kill or kidnap Prince Harry, who's now serving in Afghanistan.
Yeah, well, obviously, that's not a matter of concern. I mean, we do everything we can to protect all our troops deployed to Afghanistan, whatever might be their personal background.
Go over here.
Mander Nemri, Al Hayat TV. Je vais vous poser deux questions, Monsieur le Secrétaire Général. Alors, la première question, vu qu'il est impossible d'une intervention militaire en Syrie, est-ce que l'OTAN peut participer à des opérations humanitaires, vu qu'on a un nombre maintenant de 400 000 réfugiés, 35 000 morts? Et deuxième question, c'est concernant l'Afghanistan. Est-il possible d'établir un bilan maintenant, après 11 ans de présence en Afghanistan? C'est vrai, on commémore demain les attaques du 11 septembre. Il y avait 3 000 morts aux États-Unis, mais aujourd'hui, en Afghanistan, si on fait le total des morts, il y a presque 12 500 morts en Afghanistan. On a 100 000 morts en Irak, on a 35 000 morts en Syrie. Quel est le bilan aujourd'hui de l'OTAN avec une présence de 50 000 soldats, comme vous le dites, en Afghanistan? You can answer in English.
En ce qui concerne la Syrie, comme vous le savez, nous n'avons aucune intention d'intervenir militairement en Syrie. En ce qui concerne l'Afghanistan, le but de notre opération en Afghanistan est et reste de prévenir ce pays d'être un sanctuaire pour les terroristes. Et à cet égard, nous avons réussi.
With Kuna News Agency then. First row.
Kuwait News Agency, I think the question was asked in French, but I'll ask it in English. Has there been a revision or a rethinking on NATO's position on Syria? Thank you.
No, that's exactly what I expressed in French, that our position remains the same. NATO has no intention to intervene militarily in Syria. We do believe that the right way forward is to find a political solution. And we urge the international community to send a strong and unified message to the Syrian leadership to accommodate the legitimate aspirations of the Syrian people. So our position remains unchanged.
The Turkish media just behind.
Sertaç Aktan from Turkish news agency IHA. Tomorrow you will be marking the September of 11, the terrorist attacks on the US soil. As the terrorist the terrorists take their logistic routes from Afghanistan and their support from the regime, Taliban regime. That's why today NATO is in Afghanistan. Today we are having this situation where Turkey is having terrorist attacks in its soil, where the route and the logistic route is coming from Syria, and the support is coming from the Syrian regime, Assad regime. How do you compare these situations? Do you think there are any similarities? Thank you.
First of all, let me stress that obviously we condemn all kinds of terrorism. Whatever might be the background and the specific circumstances, nothing can justify terrorism. Let me stress that as my first point. Secondly, having said that, I think the situation in Turkey and Afghanistan are different. And once again, let me underline that as regards Syria, we do believe that the right way forward is to find a political solution based on the elements in the Annan plan, which I still think constitutes the best framework for a transition to a democracy in Syria. And I think the international community should send a very strong message to the Syrian regime that in the long run, no regime can neglect the will of the people. So consequently, the Syrian regime should accommodate the legitimate aspirations of the Syrian people.
Associated Press.
The U.S. Today handed over control of Bagram prison, the Parwan detention camp, to the Afghan authorities. Are you concerned about the possible security implications for ISAF if some of these detainees, especially the high-value people, manage to set themselves free, as they did from other Afghan-run prisons in the past?
This transfer is based on a bilateral agreement between the United States and the government of Afghanistan. And I feel confident that the parties involved have taken and will take all necessary steps to avoid any security risks. The transfer of detainees reflects the ongoing transition process in Afghanistan, during which we gradually hand over more and more responsibility to the Afghan authorities. And I take it for granted that the Afghan authorities will take all necessary measures to prevent security risks That's also in their interest.
Reuters.
Thank you. Adrian Croft from Reuters. Secretary General, on Syria, could I ask you if President Assad's forces used chemical weapons, would that justify a military intervention in Syria by NATO in that case, in your view?
Actually, that's a hypothetical question. Yet we haven't seen steps in that direction. And as a golden rule, I never comment on hypothetical situations and questions.
The back.
Richard Josviak, Radio Free Europe. I know that you've already commented on the case of Ramil Safarov, the Azeri officer who was released to Azerbaijan when you were in the region last week. But I wonder, is there something else NATO can do to lower the tensions between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which this release has triggered?
First of all, I would like to reiterate that the Azerbaijani decision to pardon Army officer Safarov is indeed a matter of concern because it damages trust and it does not contribute to the peace process in the region. And I conveyed that message to both sides during my visit to the region last week. I encouraged all parties in the region to do what they can to promote cooperation and reconciliation, and make sure that we don't return to conflict. As regards NATO's role, as you know, NATO as an organization is not directly involved in finding a solution to the very unfortunate Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. We expressed our position at the NATO summit in Chicago, and we support the Minsk group process with the aim to find a peaceful solution to that conflict. Obviously, we have partnerships with all countries in the region, and within that framework we can have a dialogue with countries, but I think the right framework for finding a solution to the conflict is still the Minsk group.
Egyptian TV.
Thank you very much. I'm Magdi Youssef from Nile News, the Egyptian television. If I understand correctly, I believe that you are very convinced that the Afghan troop, the 352, will be able to win against the enemy. How can I believe this? How can I believe that those Afghans will win against the enemy, whereas NATO did not manage to win against those enemy, Taliban? And secondly, according to some news, there is more than 250 families were fighting against NATO troops in Afghanistan. They left last week to Syria. Do you have any comment to Syria? Do you have any comment to say about this? Do you have any news about it? And isn't it a reason to go behind them in Syria? Thank you.
On the latter, I don't have any information and no comments. On the first part, actually, I do believe that it makes a big difference that the face of the defense of Afghanistan in the future will be a very visible Afghan face, which means that the enemies of Afghanistan will now be faced with their compatriots in the fighting, which will also make it much more difficult for the Taliban and others to claim that this is a fight against foreign invaders, which is one of their most popular propaganda claims. So they will be faced in direct fighting with their compatriots. Already now, it's clear that the Taliban can't prevail on the battlefield. And this is a reason why the Taliban and others resort to cowardly attacks against civilians, including children, as we have seen recently. And this is also a reason why there is a growing strong opposition in Afghanistan against the Taliban and other enemies of Afghanistan, because people see with their own eyes the cruelty and the inhumanity of the Taliban and other enemies of Afghanistan. So this combination of increasingly capable Afghan security forces and a strong will of the Afghan people to preserve the rights and the progress they have achieved during recent years, this combination will make sure that the Afghans can take full responsibility for the destiny of their own country. So I feel confident that by the end of 2014, the Afghan security forces can take full responsibility for the security all over Afghanistan.
We have time for just 2 more questions, so we'll go over there.
Oui, Renier, Journal Le Soir. Sur l'Afghanistan, quelle est la stratégie qui est mise en œuvre pour faire face à la prolifération récente d'attaques de l'intérieur des forces afghanes qui retournent leurs armes contre les forces de l'OTAN? Et peut-être une question complémentaire sur le Kosovo. Aujourd'hui, le Bureau international civil ferme ses portes. Est-ce que ça a une conséquence sur le déploiement de la KFOR au Kosovo?
En ce qui concerne le Kosovo, notre stratégie reste le même et nous n'avons pas une intention de changer le nombre des troupes déployées au Kosovo. En ce qui concerne l'Afghanistan et qu'ils appellent les attaques infiltrées, c'est vraiment un sujet de préoccupation. Et nous avons pris plusieurs mesures pour prévenir ces attaques. Premièrement, la procédure de sélection des recrues est renforcée. Deuxièmement, la contre-ingérence s'améliore. Et troisièmement, nous avons mis en œuvre davantage de formation pour mieux comprendre les différences culturelles.
Final question over there.
Unib Rashid, correspondent for Jung Group of Pakistan. Would you like to comment on current NATO and Pakistan relations, please?
As you all know, we have been through a very difficult period, including the problems stemming from the blockage of transit routes. But recently we have seen improvements, and I do hope to see further progress. Because despite all challenges, the bottom line is very clear. If we are to ensure long-term peace and stability, not only in Afghanistan, but in the whole region, we need a positive engagement of Pakistan. So that's my clear view, that we should do our utmost to ensure further progress in the relationship with Pakistan.
Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.